official public hearing. I want to welcome all of you here. My name is Rob Entz. Officially in my day job, I'm the state director for AARP, and our organization has put its backing behind this program, and we're very anxious to make sure that the citizens all have an opportunity to hear about it and understand it and ask questions. And so we welcome you here and appreciate your taking the time to learn more about Utahns for ethical government and what it means for our organization. First of all, each of you, as you came in, you had an opportunity to get sign in. I want to make sure you've had a chance to do the sign in, and that you have the materials, including the agenda. So everybody should have a copy of the agenda. We'll just kind of walk through that really quickly and tell you what we're going to cover. I will give just a brief introduction about the beginnings of the organization and why we believe there is a case for creating this initiative in the state. And then David Irvine, who was one of the attorneys who drafted the legislation, the initiative, will be here to talk more specifically about what's in it. And I would hope that this would spawn some questions and concerns that you may have, and regardless of how you feel about it, I want you to write your questions down and make sure you have an opportunity to get a clear answer when we have time for that at the end of the presentations. After David, I'm going to introduce Carmen Snow. Many of you may know her. And Carmen is here representing as a local supporter to talk about her viewpoint and as a citizen why she thinks this is important to pursue as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about the signature gathering process and just the way the whole initiative unfolds and the opportunities that you'll have to participate should you like to do that. Then we're going to dedicate some time for questions and answers. So anybody who has a specific question, we want to allow 2 minutes for comment and a question, and then we'll also provide from the panel, primarily David and myself, will respond to any questions you have. And we'll do that up until approximately 8 o'clock. And then we'll wrap it up. Just so you understand how this works, once the initiative has been created, it is filed with the Lieutenant Governor's office. There's a period of time where it resides there and goes through review and then moves on to the Governor's Office of Budget, where it is given a fiscal note. After that is done, we then have the opportunity and requirement to hold 7 public hearings throughout the state. And those are being held in various districts, designated areas. They will all wrap up by September 29th, and after the 7th and last public hearing, the signature gathering process can begin. And we'll go over the details of how that works and specifically what the requirements are for that if you have a desire to learn more about it. So, everybody has that, and all I want to encourage everybody is that we have a civil discourse tonight. Civil dialogue, that we respect each other's questions and points of view, and again that we follow the time limit of 2 minutes, and that we're courteous and don't disrupt one another, but allow for a question and a comment to be thoroughly expressed and answered. So with that, let me just introduce you to why we think that this has become a necessary. See if I got this little guy to work here. When we initially announced this initiative, we felt there were a couple of things that our intent would do. First of all, this is long overdue. The citizens, and it's been demonstrated by polls, that they have a great interest in seeing a higher ethical standard in the legislature. Again, one recently done by Desert News, I think with Dan Jones, and I think it's better than 80% of the population is in support of some ethics reform. And we are only one of about 10 states in the country that does not have a commission and a code of conduct that either advises or sets a standard for our legislative behavior. So in a sense, rather than be a leader, we're kind of at the back of the pack. And the experience, as illustrated in a cartoon, is that the ethics reform continues to wait for the next session of the legislature, and then when it occurs, really nothing significant happens. Okay, so I'm going to cover the why, and I mentioned that Dave will cover the what, and then we'll have, if I can get this little thing to respond, okay? Maybe need some batteries. There's a lot of writing on these slides, and I don't want to necessarily burden you with having to read or me repeat everything there. I want to just hit the highlights on these things as we talk about it. And if again you see something that you want to make a note of, that you have a specific question, in particular to the reference where the information has come from, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to see that and make note of it. And a lot of this information is also available on the UtahEthics.org website, okay, as well as the petition. So here are some things that can happen when there is no ethics commission. For example, in 2008, a former Utah legislator was accused another of bribery. An internal committee of 8 legislators met, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. They heard the complaint. Ultimately, the accused legislator reported that he had been exonerated by the committee. And actually what had happened is the committee voted unanimously to reprimand the legislator, but about the guilt, the committee was deadlocked. The 4 Democrats voted he was guilty, the 4 Republicans said he was not. The reference for that is the Deseret News, October 29th, 2008. We are, you may or may not be aware, a state that has no limit on campaign contributions, one of only 6 states. And those are highlighted in white. And that's from the National Council of, the National Conference of State Legislatures. You may or may not be aware that special interest groups provide most of the money for Utah legislators' campaigns. As reported by Lee Davidson, at least 81 cents of every dollar donated to lawmakers in last year's election came from special interests that have often had business before the legislature. Corporations donate without any limitations in the state of Utah. 1/3 of all the 2009 donations to candidates came from corporations, a total of $2.45 million, again according to Deseret News in June of 2009. So here's an example of unlimited contributions. Since 2006, one Utah corporation has spent over $500,000 on Utah politicians from both parties, $400,000 on congressional candidates, and $1 million on lobbyists. The same corporation contributed money to more than 80% of the sitting legislators. Okay? As again reported by the Salt Lake Tribune. You may or may not be aware that legislators can spend their campaign funds pretty much as they desire. Taken from the website of a current member of the House, this is what was written. Legislators are currently allowed to spend money they receive as campaign contributions on anything they want to, even personal expenses unrelated to politics or campaigning. Consequently, Utah senators and representatives have often spent the money on such items: clothing, digital cameras, or car repairs. Another popular expenditure is travel costs, not only for the lawmaker, but also for his or her family members. Some legislators have even used the funds to pay themselves or their spouse an additional salary. Again, those are the words of a current sitting legislator. Another problem we see is that in Utah, legislators can be and are lobbyists. Up until the past session, there was no limitation on legislators becoming lobbyists. In 2009, the law was passed prohibiting legislators from joining a firm for about a year. However, we feel like the exemptions in the bill are so broad that it's essentially useless, but it leaves some rather large loopholes. Also, sitting legislators can accept employment for lobbyists. A group of lobbyists are being asked to find a job right now for a lawmaker who is in a position to influence their legislative agendas. If you look at Paul Raleigh's article recently, September 10th of 2009, you'll see reported about a solicitation for a friend of the legislature who is in need of work, somebody who has supported their issues. Although merit ought to determine leadership positions in the state, sometimes money rules. Here's what happens. You have a lobbyist who gives money to the legislator. Some legislators turn around and give that money to other legislators. So again, the cycle, not surprisingly, is that person gets voted to become the elected leader. Recent case, one legislator bank account of over $300,000, largely contributed by lobbyists.